The village of Umua was so small that most maps ignored it. Travelers could pass the dusty junction without ever realizing hundreds of people lived beyond it, surviving quietly between farms, roadside kiosks, and houses worn down by time. Amaka had spent all 26 years of her life there. Her home stood behind a row of stalls selling tomatoes, dried fish, and sachet water. It was a single room built from aging cement blocks, with faded walls and a zinc roof that rattled violently whenever rain arrived. During storms, water slipped through the holes, and Amaka placed plastic bowls beneath each leak before going back to sleep. Inside were only a narrow bed, a wooden table, a kerosene stove, and a worn curtain pretending to divide the room. It was poor, but it was hers. Every morning, Amaka woke before the first rooster crowed. She owned no alarm clock. Hardship had trained her body to rise while the village was still dark. She wrapped a thin cloth around herself, knelt beside the bed, and repeated the same prayer. God, give me strength today. Help me serve with patience. Let someone smile because of me. She never prayed for wealth or a powerful husband. She asked only for enough strength to survive another day without allowing poverty to make her bitter. After carrying water from the community borehole, Amaka bathed quickly, pressed her faded blue uniform, and tied her hair into a neat bun. Years of washing had turned the fabric almost pale, but she wore it proudly. It was the only professional clothing she owned. That morning, Amaka left for work believing it would be another ordinary day serving people who barely noticed her. She had no idea that before sunset, one act of kindness toward a stranger would expose a billionaire's hidden identity and change her life forever. The Umua Community Clinic was small. 2 consultation rooms, 1 delivery room, and a waiting area with wooden benches that groaned under weight. The paint on the walls was peeling. The ceiling fan worked only when electricity decided to bless them, and electricity rarely felt generous. Amaka had completed nursing school with the help of church donations and a scholarship from a local women's association. She had graduated near the top of her class, but when it came time to find work in the city, connections mattered more than grades. She had no connections, so she returned home. Some people called her foolish for staying. You are wasting your certificate here. One of her former classmates had told her over the phone from Legos, you should come and hustle. But Amaka didn't see her work as waste. She saw it as calling. Every day at the clinic, she treated malaria, dressed wounds, delivered babies, comforted mothers, and calmed frightened children. She worked alongside one aging doctor who came only 3 times a week, and a pharmacist who complained constantly about salary delays. Amaka never complained. Even when her salary came late, even when it was too small, even when she skipped meals to afford transport to buy medical supplies the clinic lacked. Her hands were gentle. Patients often said that there is peace in your touch. An elderly man once told her after she dressed his ulcer. She would laugh shilly and say, it's just practice. But it wasn't practice. It was compassion. By late afternoon, when the clinic closed, most of the staff rushed home. The pharmacist hurried to his side business. The cleaner packed up quickly, but Amaka stayed behind a little longer. She cleaned the surfaces herself, rearranged supplies, checked patient files. Then she would pack a small nylon bag. Inside it were gloves, bandages, ointment, paracetamol, and sometimes food she cooked at dawn. And she would begin her second journey of the day. The path to the edge of the village was uneven and narrow. Goats often blocked the way. Children played football with worn-out plastic balls, shouting loudly. At the very end of that path stood a small mud hut. It leaned slightly to one side as if tired of standing. That hut belonged to Mom Goy. Years ago, Mom Goy had been respected. Her late husband owned farmland. She was known for her strong voice in community meetings. But time had thinned her body and scattered her wealth. Her husband died. Relatives took pieces of land. Friends drifted away. Age settled heavily into her bones. Now she lived alone. Her legs were stiff with arthritis. Her eyesight blurred. Sometimes she forgot what day it was, and sometimes she cried quietly at night, not because of pain, but because of loneliness. Amaka met her 2 years ago when she collapsed near the market. While others gathered to stare, a macaca pushed through the crowd. She needs air, she had commanded gently but firmly. She checked her pulse, asked questions, organized transport to the clinic. After that day, something inside her refused to let the old woman fade away unseen. So, she began visiting. First, it was twice a week, then 3 times. Eventually, every day, The hut smelled of dried herbs and old smoke. The roof had holes patched with nylon. A thin mattress lay on the floor, and beside it, a small wooden stool that served as both table and cupboard. Each evening, Amaka would greet her softly. "Mama, it's me," and the old woman's tired face would light up. "My nurse has come." Amaka would sweep the floor first, then help Mama Goy sit upright. She cleaned her body with warm water, changed her wrappers, applied ointment to her swollen knees, and massaged them slowly. Sometimes Mom and would woes. "Sorry, Mama, you have angel hands," the old woman would whisper. Afterward, Amaka fed her pap, rice, or beans, depending on what she could afford. On days when money was tight, she shared her own portion. The villagers noticed. Of course, they noticed. Villages notice everything. One evening, as Amaka walked back from the hut, two women whispered loudly near the well. "That girl is wasting her youth. She spends all her time with that useless old woman. What will she gain from it?" Amaka heard them. She always did, but she kept walking because kindness is loudest in silence. Some nights after returning home exhausted, she would sit on her bed and stare at the wall. Her body ached. Her salary was barely enough. Her future felt uncertain. She was 26. Many girls her age were married. Some already had children. Occasionally, doubt would creep in. What if she remained poor forever? What if her kindness changed nothing? What if she grew old alone too? She would shake her head gently and lie down. Then she would whisper one more prayer. "God, let me matter to someone." What she didn't know was that in the small hut at the edge of the village, Mom and Goy prayed to my son. The old woman would murmur into the darkness, "If you ever return, may you meet this girl. She is worth more than gold." Far away across oceans and skyscrapers, that son was building an empire. But in Umua, under a leaking roof and a fading sky, a nurse with gentle hands was unknowingly shaping a destiny far bigger than her small room. And destiny, when it begins quietly, often sounds like ordinary kindness. Amaka had no idea that her simple evening walks would one day change her life. For now, she only knew this. Tomorrow, she would wake before the rooster crowed. She would pray for strength. And she would go back to the hut, because love, the purest kind, does not wait for reward. It simply shows up. The hut looked smaller each time the wind blew against it. Its mud walls were cracked like old palms that had worked too hard for too many years. During the dry season, fine dust settled inside no matter how often it was swept. During the rainy season, dampness clung to everything. The thin mattress, the wooden stool, even the air itself. But to Mama and Goy, it was still home. And to Amaka, it was sacred ground. Every evening, just as the sky began turning orange, and the village noise softened into cooking sounds and distant laughter, Amaka would appear at the narrow footpath that led to the hut. Her slippers made soft, steady sounds against the earth. She never rushed, even after spending 8 hours at the clinic. Even after skipping lunch because a pregnant woman needed emergency attention. Even after her feet throbbed from standing all day, she never rushed. "Mama, I'm here," she would call gently before pushing the crooked wooden door open. Inside, the air always carried the scent of dried leaves. Mom and burned to chase away mosquitoes. A small kerosene lamp sat in the corner. Though it was rarely lit before sunset, kerosene cost money. Mom and Goy would be lying on her side, thin frame curled slightly inward as if trying to hold herself together. "My daughter," she would whisper when she heard Amaka's voice. That word daughter always did something to Amaka's chest. Amaka had lost her own mother when she was 17. A sudden illness, too fast, too unfair. Since then, the word daughter felt like both a wound and a blessing. She would set down her nylon bag and get to work immediately. First, she opened the small window to let in air. Then, she rolled up the thin mat and swept the floor carefully. The hut floor was just hardened earth, uneven and cool beneath her feet. While sweeping, she talked, not because Mama Goy always responded clearly. Some days her memory drifted, but because silence could be heavy. Today at the clinic, a little boy refused his injection. Amaka would say lightly, "He told me he was strong like a lion." Mama and Goy would chuckle weakly. "And did the lion cry?" "Oh," he roared. Amaka would tease, but only for 5 minutes. They would laugh together, soft, fragile laughter that seemed too delicate for the world outside. After cleaning, Amaka would kneel beside the old woman. Let's sit up, Mama. She supported her carefully, one arm behind her shoulders, the other guiding her fragile legs. Mom and Go's joints were stiff, her fingers slightly twisted from arthritis. Even the act of sitting upright required effort. Sorry, Mangoy would murmur when she winced. No, sorry, Amaka would reply gently. We are together. She warmed water in a small pot over a portable stove she had bought with her own savings. She tested the temperature with her wrist before dipping a clean cloth into it. Then she began slowly wiping Mom and Go's face, her neck, her arms, her back. There was nothing hurried about the way she worked. She treated the old woman's fragile skin as though it were silk. In a world that had discarded Mom Gozi, Aka handled her like treasure. After cleaning her body, she carefully removed the old bandages from her knees. The joints were swollen, darkened with age and strain. She applied ointment gently, massaging in slow circles the way she had learned during training. Your hands are warm, Mama and Goy would whisper. Warm hands heal faster, Amaka would reply with a small smile. Truthfully, her hands were often cold from exhaustion, but kindness warms even what fatigue chills. Sometimes when the pain was intense, Mom and Goy would grow quiet. Her breathing would become shallow. On those days, Amaka would hum lullabies her mother used to sing. Songs that spoke of protection, of mercy, of home. The hut would feel less broken when she sang. Once during one of those evenings, Mom Goy studied her carefully. Why do you come? She asked suddenly. Amaka paused. Because you need care. Many need care. Amaka hesitated. I don't want you to be alone. Mama Go's cloudy eyes softened. Loneliness is heavier than sickness, she murmured. Amaka understood that more than she liked to admit. After cleaning and dressing her wounds, Amaka would feed her. She brought whatever she could manage. Pap, rice, boiled plantain, sometimes fish when salary had just arrived. She fed her patiently, spoon by spoon. If Mom and Go's hands shook too much, Amaka held the bowl steady. If she coughed, Amaka rubbed her back. The villagers had noticed. They always noticed. One afternoon, as Amaka fetched water from the borehole near the hut, 2 teenage girls giggled nearby. She behaves like that old woman is her inheritance. Inheritance of what? That broken hut. They laughed. Amaka kept her eyes on the bucket. She was not deaf, but she had learned something important. Not every voice deserved response. Still, sometimes their words followed her home. At night, lying on her narrow bed, she would stare at the ceiling and wonder, was she foolish? She earned barely enough. She had no savings to speak of, no fiancé, no promises of a different future. Her classmates posted pictures from city hospitals, wearing crisp uniforms, smiling beside modern equipment, and she cleaned a mud hut every evening. But every time doubt tried to root itself in her heart, something stronger pushed back. When Mama and Goy smiled after eating, when she slept peacefully after a massage, when she whispered, God bless you, my child. Those moments felt heavier than money. One evening, rain fell unexpectedly while a macaca was inside the hut. The sound on the patched zinc roof was loud, chaotic. Water began to drip through one of the nylon-covered holes. Without thinking, a macaca moved a small basin under the leak, then another and another. Soon the hut sounded like a drum, rain pounding from above, drops echoing into metal bowls. Mama and Goy looked anxious. Will it collapse? She asked weakly. No, Amaka assured her calmly, though she wasn't entirely certain. This hut has survived many seasons. She sat beside her until the rain softened. That night, as she prepared to leave, Mom and Goy caught her wrist gently. My son, she said. Amaka leaned closer. Yes, Mama, my son will come back one day. Amaka smiled softly. She had heard fragments of this story before. A son who traveled abroad who promised to return successful. Yes, Mama. He is a good boy, she insisted faintly. He just stayed too long. There was no bitterness in her voice, only longing. Amaka adjusted her wrapper gently. When he comes, he will be proud of you, she said. Mango's gaze lingered on her face. No, she whispered slowly. He will be proud of you. Amaka laughed lightly. Why me? Because when blood forgets, kindness remembers. The words settled into the small hut like something sacred. That night, as Amaka walked home beneath a sky washed clean by rain, she felt an unusual stirring in her chest. She didn't know why. She didn't know how, but something about the old woman's words felt bigger than imagination. Back inside the hut, Mom and Goy lay awake for a long time. She thought of her son, tall, ambitious, stubborn. She thought of the day he left, promising wealth. She thought of the years that followed. Then she thought of Amaka, the nurse with patient hands and tired eyes that still carried light. And she prayed, "Lord, if my son returns rich, let him not be blind to what is truly valuable." Outside the village quieted into night. Dogs barked in the distance. Palm trees rustled. And inside the small hut that looked too fragile to survive another season, something stronger than mud walls was being built. A bond unseen, unmeasured, but powerful enough to change lives. Amaka did not know it yet, but destiny had already found its way to the edge of the village, and it was waiting quietly. 15 years is a long time. Long enough for a child to become a man. Long enough for buildings to rise and collapse. Long enough for promises to grow thin. When Tochi left Umua, he was 22 years old with one suitcase, 2 pairs of trousers, and a head full of restless ambition. The day he departed, the entire village gathered near the old junction road. His mother stood in front, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, pride shining in her eyes even as her fingers trembled. "You will come back for me," she had said, holding his face in both hands. "I will build you a house bigger than the chief's," he replied confidently. "You won't suffer again." He believed it. He truly did. Back then, poverty felt like something you could outrun. The first years abroad were brutal. Cold winters that bit through his thin coat, factory jobs that paid just enough to survive, nights when he lay on a small mattress in a shared apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had made a mistake. But Tochi was not built for surrender. He studied at night, learned business principles, watched how successful people moved. He was observant, always had been. While others partied, he worked extra shifts. While others complained, he planned. Opportunity did not knock politely. It arrived disguised as risk. A small investment in logistics, then another in real estate, then a bold partnership that either would have ruined him or made him unstoppable. It made him unstoppable. Within 10 years, Tochi's name carried weight in business circles. He was known for sharp negotiation skills, calculated risks, and a calm expression that revealed very little. He wore tailored suits now, owned properties in 2 countries, attended conferences where people introduced him as a visionary. He learned to speak in measured tones, learned when to smile, learned how to dominate a room without raising his voice. He became wealthy, very wealthy, and somewhere between contracts and private meetings, something quiet shifted. At first, he called his mother every Sunday. He sent money regularly, more than she had ever seen in her lifetime. He asked about the farm, about neighbors, about the old mango tree beside their hut. "I will come soon," he always said. Soon turned into next year. Next year turned into when the deal closes. When the deal closes, turned into when the market stabilizes. Success has a way of stretching time until you don't realize it's His calendar filled months ahead. He upgraded apartments, then bought a penthouse, then purchased his first Rolls-Royce. He remembered staring at the car the day it was delivered. Sleek, polished, powerful, felt like proof that the village boy had conquered the world. He told himself his mother would be proud, and she was. Every time neighbors visited Mom and Goy, she would mention her son. "My Tochi is abroad," she would say with quiet pride. "He is doing big things." When he sent money to renovate part of the hut years ago, she refused to leave the village. "This is my home," she told him over the phone. "Then I will build you a better one there," he insisted. But construction plans were delayed. Always delayed. Meanwhile, in the city where Tochi now lived, life moved at a different speed. Women noticed him, tall, confident, reserved. Money wrapped around him like an invisible perfume. He attended galas, charity dinners, corporate parties where champagne flowed freely and laughter sounded polished. He dated occasionally, elegant women with impressive resumes. But something always felt transactional. Conversations revolved around assets, expansion, travel plans. No one asked him about the red dust roads of Umua. No one knew about the mango tree. No one had seen him before the suits. And slowly, without intending to, Tochi buried that version of himself. The village boy became a memory he visited less often until the call came. It was late evening. He was in his office reviewing documents when his phone vibrated with an unfamiliar Nigerian number. He almost ignored it. Almost. Hello? He answered, distracted. Is this Tochi, son of Mosi? An older male voice asked. His posture straightened. Yes. Who is this? I am your cousin, Emma. I am calling about your mother. The air shifted. Something in the man's tone carried weight. What about her? Tochi asked sharply. There was a pause. She is very weak. She fell last week. She has not been walking properly. The clinic nurse helps. But she is not strong. For a moment the room felt smaller. When did this happen? Tochi demanded. She has been declining for months. Months. The word hit harder than it should have. Why didn't anyone tell me? We thought you were busy. Busy. Tochi's jaw tightened. After the call ended, he remained seated, staring at the dark screen of his phone. Images surfaced uninvited, his mother's hands kneading dough, her voice calling him inside at sunset, the way she wrapped food for him on his departure day, pretending not to cry. 15 years. 15 years of soon. A wave of guilt rose from somewhere deep, uncomfortable, sharp, unavoidable. He stood abruptly and walked toward the glass wall of his office. The city lights glittered below him, beautiful and indifferent. He had conquered markets, but he had failed time. He picked up his phone again and called his assistant. Cancel my meetings for the next 2 weeks. There was silence on the other end. Sir, the investors cancel them. His voice carried a firmness that allowed no debate. That night, he did not attend the charity dinner he was scheduled to headline. He did not return messages from colleagues asking about an upcoming deal. Instead, he went home and opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside was a faded photograph. His mother stood beside him in front of their hut. He was younger, slimmer, less polished. She looked strong then, her eyes bright, her shoulders squared. He traced the edge of the picture slowly. I'm coming home, Mama, he whispered. The next morning, preparations moved quickly. Private flight arrangements, security notifications, vehicle transportation scheduled ahead of arrival. He decided to bring the Rolls-Royce, not for show, but because in some quiet corner of his heart, he wanted her to see what he had achieved. He wanted her to know her sacrifices had not been wasted. As the plane lifted into the sky, Tochi leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, his mind was not occupied with profit margins. Instead, it wandered to memories he had long neglected. The taste of roasted corn by the roadside, the sound of village children playing, his mother's laughter when he tried to fix a broken stool and failed. He wondered what she looked like now. Would she recognize him immediately? Would she forgive him for staying away so long? Below the clouds, continents shifted. Above them, something inside Tochi shifted too. Success had given him status, but it had not given him peace. And peace, he was beginning to realize, might not be found in boardrooms or luxury cars. It might be waiting in a small hut at the edge of a dusty village. As the plane began its descent into Nigeria, Tochi felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Not fear, not pride, something softer, anticipation, and perhaps redemption. He had left as a young man chasing wealth. He was returning as a billionaire. But he did not yet know that the most valuable thing waiting for him was not land, not property, not inheritance. It was a nurse with gentle hands who had been loving his mother in his absence, and destiny, patient as ever, was about to introduce them. The morning Tochi arrived in Umua, the village woke up to a sound it had never heard before. It was not the rumble of okadas, not the grumbling of the old community generator, not the laughter of school children chasing each other barefoot. It was smooth, deep, powerful, a sound that did not belong to red dust roads and mudhouses. Heads turned before the car even appeared. Then slowly, like a scene unfolding in a movie, the sleek black Rolls-Royce glided into view, its polished body reflecting the sun like glass. Dust rose behind it in confused spirals. Children stopped their game mid-kick. Women paused while fanning their charcoal stoves. Even the goats scattered. The car moved carefully along the narrow road, as if uncertain how to behave in a place so humble. Inside, Tochi sat still. His jaw was tight. His heart was louder than the engine. As the vehicle approached the last stretch of the village, the part he once walked barefoot as a boy, memories hit him unexpectedly. There was the tree he used to climb, the abandoned well he once fell into and climbed out of soaked and embarrassed, the small kiosk where his mother bought him sweets on market days. Nothing had changed, and yet everything felt smaller. "Sir, we've arrived," his driver said gently. The car slowed, then stopped right in front of the hut. It looked worse than he remembered. The mud walls leaned slightly, as though time had been pushing against them without mercy. The roof's zinc sheets were patched with nylon and old fabric. For a brief second, shame tightened around his chest. He had money, more than enough, and yet this was where his mother had been living. The door of the Rolls-Royce opened. Tochi stepped out. He wore a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, dark sunglasses shielding his eyes. The watch on his wrist could build half the village, but in that moment, none of it mattered. The villagers gathered slowly at a distance, whispering, "Is that? It looks like Nosey's son. He came back with that kind of car. He must be very rich." Toy barely heard them. His eyes were fixed on the hut. Then he heard something else. A soft voice from inside. "Mama, small more. Just a little." The voice was gentle, calm, patient. Tochi's heart skipped. He stepped forward quietly, his polished shoes pressing into the dusty ground. The hut door was slightly open, and that was when he saw her. A young woman knelt beside his mother on a thin mattress. She wore a simple, pale blue nurse uniform. Her hair was tied back neatly. Her sleeves were rolled up slightly, revealing slim, steady arms. She held a spoon carefully to his mother's lips. "Good," she said softly. "You're doing well." His mother, frail, thinner than he remembered, swallowed slowly. Tochi felt something break inside him. This was not the strong woman who waved him goodbye 15 years ago. This was a body worn down by time. And beside her was a stranger caring for her with tenderness that looked real, not forced, not professional, real. Amaka did not notice him at first. She was focused. When Mom and Goy coughed lightly, she immediately set the bowl aside and rubbed her back gently. "I'm here," she whispered. "Breathe slowly." Toy removed his sunglasses slowly. His throat felt tight. He had sent money. He had paid for occasional medicine deliveries, but he had not been here, and this woman had. The wooden floor creaked softly under his step. Amaka looked up. Their eyes met. For a second, the world narrowed. She did not see the billionaire. She saw a tall stranger in an expensive suit standing in the doorway of a fragile hut. And something about his face, the intensity, the emotion barely controlled, made her stand slowly. "Yes," she asked carefully. Her voice was calm but alert. Tochi swallowed. I'm Tochi." Silence. Mama and Go's eyes widened faintly. "My son," she whispered weakly. The word hit him harder than anything else had. He stepped forward quickly and dropped to his knees beside her. "Mama." Her fragile hands reached up, trembling, touching his face as though confirming he was not imagination. "You came," she breathed. Tears he hadn't allowed in 15 years slipped down his face without permission. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The hut felt too small to contain that moment. Amaka stepped back slightly, giving them space, but she didn't leave. She watched, not intruding, not judging, just present. Toy held his mother carefully, noticing how light she felt. Too light, his chest tightened again. "How long has she been like this?" he asked quietly, turning slightly toward Amaka. "Some months," she replied honestly. "Her joints are weak. She needs consistent care." There was no accusation in her tone, just fact. That lack of blame unsettled him more than anger would have. "You are?" he asked. "Amaka. I'm the nurse at the community clinic. You come here daily?" "Yes." "How much do you charge?" The question slipped out automatically. The language of his world. Amaka's expression changed slightly. "I don't," she said calmly. He frowned. "You don't." She needed help. Simple, direct, no performance. Tochi stared at her properly now. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her uniform was clean, but clearly worn from many washes. There was tiredness in her eyes, but also something steady. Strength. "You do this after clinic hours?" he pressed. "Yes. And no one pays you?" She hesitated slightly. "I didn't ask." Outside, villagers whispered louder, trying to peek inside. The Rolls-Royce stood like a symbol of another universe, gleaming against mud walls. Inside the hut, two worlds collided quietly, one built on wealth, the other on compassion. Tochi looked around. The patched roof, the worn mattress, the small bowl of Amaka had brought. Anger stirred in him. Not at her, at himself. He stood abruptly. "This place isn't fit," he muttered. "I'll move her immediately. Private hospital." Amaka stepped forward gently. "She is stable for now. Sudden movement might shock her." He paused. She wasn't challenging him. She was protecting his mother. "You think I don't want what's best for her?" he asked, tension slipping into his voice. "I think," Amaka replied softly. "She has been surviving here. Let's not overwhelm her today." The hut fell quiet. No one spoke to Tochi that way in boardrooms. But there was no disrespect in her voice. Only care. He exhaled slowly. Mama and Goy squeezed his hand weakly. "Stay," she whispered. So he did. For the rest of that afternoon, the billionaire who commanded companies sat on the floor of a mud hut. He watched Amaka clean the space, watched her prepare medication, watched how she spoke gently but firmly when Mom and Goy resisted swallowing pills. He noticed the way she listened fully without checking a phone, without distraction. Something about her unsettled him, not because she was dramatic, but because she wasn't. She moved with quiet purpose. When she finally packed her bag to leave, she paused near the doorway. "I'll return tomorrow," she said. Tochi stood. "Wait," she turned. "Thank you," he said. The words felt unfamiliar in his mouth. She gave a small nod. "She raised a good son," Amaka replied gently. The sentence pierced him unexpectedly because he wasn't sure he deserved it. As she stepped outside, the villagers stared at her, now looking at her differently. She walked past the Rolls-Royce without even glancing at it, and Tochi noticed that he watched her figure disappear down the dusty path. Inside the hut, Mama and Goy smiled faintly. "She is a blessing," she murmured. Tochi looked toward the doorway again. He had come home to rescue his mother. He did not expect to find someone who had already been doing it, and for the first time in years, something stirred in his chest that had nothing to do with ambition, respect, curiosity, and the faint, dangerous beginning of admiration. The Rolls-Royce gleamed outside, but inside the hut, a different kind of wealth had just revealed itself, and Tochi, though he did not yet understand it, had just stepped into a story far bigger than money. That night, Tochi did not leave. The villagers expected him to. They thought he would greet his mother, perhaps arrange quick hospital transfer, then disappear into a hotel in the nearest city, somewhere with air conditioning and polished floors. But he didn't. Instead, he removed his suit jacket, folded it carefully, and placed it on the only wooden stool inside the hut. He rolled up his sleeves. He sat beside his mother on the thin mattress. The billionaire stayed outside. Whispers traveled like hermit wind. He's sleeping there in that hut with all his money. Inside, Tochi barely noticed. The hut felt smaller at night. The kerosene lamp cast trembling shadows on the cracked walls. The roof creaked occasionally as wind brushed against it. Mom and Goy slept lightly, her breathing uneven but peaceful. Tochi sat awake, watching her, listening. Every shallow inhale felt like a reminder of years he could not retrieve. At some point, his gaze drifted toward the door. He thought about the nurse, Amaka, the way she had stood straight when speaking to him, not intimidated, not impressed. The way she corrected him gently when he wanted to rush things. No one corrected him gently anymore. They either flattered him or feared him. She did neither, and it unsettled him. Morning arrived with soft rooster cries and the smell of firewood smoke. Tochi had not slept much. He stepped outside briefly, stretching his stiff back. The village looked different in daylight, quieter, slower. Children stared at him openly before giggling and running away. The Rolls-Royce still stood like an alien object against mud walls. By mid-morning, he heard footsteps approaching. He didn't need to look up to know it was her. "Good morning," Amacha's voice came before she entered. She stepped into the hut carrying her usual nylon bag. Then she noticed him sitting there. "You stayed?" she said, mild surprise in her tone. "Yes," she nodded once. "Good, just that." Not dramatic praise, not admiration, just good. She moved past him toward Mom and Goy. "How was the night?" she asked gently. "She kept waking," Tochi replied. Amaka checked her pulse, her temperature, adjusted her wrapper carefully. "You did well to stay," she said quietly, not looking at him. The words warmed him more than they should have. While she worked, Tochi watched her closely. Her movements were precise but soft. When she spoke to his mother, her voice dropped slightly, carrying warmth that felt deeply personal. "Mama, today we'll try sitting outside for fresh air," she suggested. Mama and smiled faintly. "With both of you here, I feel strong," she murmured. "Both of them," the words lingered. When Amaka finished examining her, she stood and faced Tochi properly for the first time in daylight. Up close, he noticed faint shadows under her eyes, exhaustion carefully hidden. Her hands, though steady, carried small calluses. "You should eat something," she said. He almost laughed. People usually asked about his companies, not his breakfast. "I'm fine," he replied. She tilted her head slightly. "Fine is not food." He blinked. Was she scolding him? Before he could answer, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small plastic container. "I brought extra pap," she said simply. In case Mama didn't finish, she placed it on the stool and went back to tending his mother. Tochi stared at the container. No one had brought him homemade food in years. Meals in his world came plated in restaurants, served by staff, calculated in cost. This felt different, human. He opened it slowly and took a spoonful. It was warm, simple, comforting, and something about that taste pulled him unexpectedly backward in time to mornings when his mother fed him before school. He swallowed carefully. Amaka noticed without commenting. After settling Mom and Gozi upright near the doorway for fresh air, Amaka stepped outside to rinse a cloth with water from a bucket. Tochi followed her. The sunlight caught in her hair. "Why do you do this?" he asked suddenly. She glanced at him. "Do what? Come here every day for 2 years." She shrugged slightly. "She needed care. You could have charged. I didn't want to." He studied her face, searching for hidden motive. "Do you know who I am?" he asked quietly. She met his gaze directly. "Yes, and you are her son." No calculation, just fact. He felt something inside him shift again. "You're not curious," he pressed. "About what? About my life? My business?" She smiled faintly. "If you want to tell me, you will." The simplicity of her response unsettled him in a way boardroom negotiations never had. He was used to curiosity fueled by advantage, not restraint. Inside the hut, Mom and Goy called weakly. Amaka returned immediately. Toy lingered outside for a moment, watching her. The village breeze moved gently through the trees. Life here did not rush. It breathed. Later that afternoon, while Amaka was carefully massaging ointment into Mom Goz's knees, Tochi knelt beside them. "Teach me," he said. She looked up. "What?" "How to do it properly." For a moment, she hesitated. Then she shifted slightly to make space. "Use your palm, not just your fingers," she instructed softly. "Slow circles. Don't press too hard." Their hands briefly brushed. The contact was small but electric. Both pretended not to notice. Mom and Goy watched them quietly, a faint knowing smile touching her lips. "You see?" Amaka encouraged gently. Like that, he adjusted his pressure. "Is this okay?" She nodded. Yes. There was something intimate about the moment. Not romantic yet, but deeply connected. Two people caring for the same fragile life. Not competing, not performing, simply present. After a while, Amaka packed her things. "I'll return this evening to check again," she said. Toy walked her toward the path. This time, the Rolls-Royce gleamed behind them. Silent witness. "You live far?" he asked. "Not too far. Do you always walk?" "Yes." He looked at the car. "I can have someone drop you." She shook her head gently. "I prefer walking." He frowned slightly. "Why?" "It clears my mind." He didn't know what to say to that. She paused before stepping onto the narrow path. "Your mother was worried you wouldn't come," she said quietly. His chest tightened. "I should have come sooner." Yes. The agreement wasn't harsh. It was honest. He appreciated that more than false comfort. "But you came," she added softly, and somehow that felt like forgiveness. She turned to leave. After a few steps, he called out, "Amaka." She looked back. "Thank you." This time, the gratitude in his voice carried weight. She held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "Take care of her," she replied. "I will. And take care of yourself, too." Then she walked away. Tochi stood there longer than he intended, watching until her figure disappeared behind the trees. Something unfamiliar stirred in him. He had built success through strategy. through precision, through control. But whatever this was, this quiet pull toward a village nurse with tired eyes and steady hands, it was not calculated, it was not strategic, simply was. Back inside the hut, Mom and Goy looked at her son knowingly. "She is different," she murmured. Tochi sat beside her again. "Yes," he admitted quietly. For the first time since arriving, his thoughts were not consumed by guilt or logistics or image. They were consumed by her, the nurse who brought pap, the nurse who corrected him without fear, the nurse who did not care about his Rolls Royce. And as evening approached, Tochi realized something unsettling. He was already looking forward to tomorrow. Not for business, not for status, but for first words that felt real. By the third day, the Rolls Royce no longer caused a stampede. The villagers still stared, of course. Children still ran their fingers along its polished body when the driver wasn't looking, but curiosity had settled into something quieter now. The real spectacle was not the car. It was the man who owned it, sitting daily inside a mud hut. Tochi had postponed his return flight twice already. His assistant called every morning. "Sir, the board meeting. Riskedu. The investors are asking." Let them ask. Each time he hung up, he felt strangely lighter. The world he had built abroad was structured, efficient, loud. Everything ran on urgency. Here in Umua, time moved differently. Slowly, intentionally, like it was not trying to outrun itself. And at the center of this slower world stood Amaka. She arrived each morning at nearly the same time, greeting Mom and Goy first before acknowledging him. Fascinated him. He was used to being the axis of attention, but here, he was secondary, and oddly he liked it. That morning, she entered with fresh vegetables tucked inside her bag. "I'll cook light soup today," she said. Soft food is easier for her. "You cook too?" he asked. She gave him a brief look. Survival skill. There was no bitterness in her tone, just fact. He watched as she moved around the hut comfortably, lighting the small stove, cutting vegetables carefully on a worn wooden board, checking Mom and Go's temperature between steps. Her efficiency wasn't hurried. It was practiced. "You've done this before," he observed. She nodded. "I cared for my mother before she passed." He froze slightly. "I'm sorry." She paused only for a second before continuing to slice. It was years ago, but something flickered in her eyes. Not weakness, but memory. For the first time, he realized her kindness had roots. This wasn't performance. It was lived experience. Later, while Mom Gozi rested after eating, Tochi stepped outside. Amaka joined him a few minutes later, wiping her hands with a small towel. "You need better facilities," he said suddenly, "for the clinic." She looked at him cautiously. "We manage." "You shouldn't have to manage." She studied him. "And what do you suggest?" "I can fund it. Renovate the building, bring modern equipment." The offer was natural to him. Money solved problems. It was the language he spoke fluently, but Amaka did not immediately light up. "That's generous," she said carefully. But sometimes when help comes too fast, people forget how to stand." He frowned slightly. "You think I want control?" "I think." She hesitated, choosing her words thoughtfully. "Real growth should include the people who live here." He exhaled slowly. No one had ever responded to his generosity like that. Most people rushed to say yes. She was protecting the dignity of the village. He felt a strange surge of respect. "You're not impressed by money," he said quietly. She gave a small smile. "I work where people can't afford paracetamol. Money is useful, but it's not magic." The statement settled between them. He leaned against the tree near the hut. "What impresses you?" he asked. She seemed surprised by the question. "Consistency," she replied after a moment. "Integrity. People who show up." The words hit deeper than she intended because for 15 years he hadn't shown up. He changed the subject. "You refused my payment." "Yes." "Why?" She looked directly at him. "If I start charging your mother now, it changes something." "What? The reason I came in the first place?" He was quiet. Her reasoning was simple, pure. In his world, transactions defined relationships. Here she was guarding something he had nearly forgotten existed. Sincerity without leverage. Inside the hut, Mom and Goy stirred. They both returned immediately. As Amaka adjusted the old woman's pillow, Tochi found himself studying the way sunlight fell across her face. She was not dressed expensively, no jewelry, no glamour, yet there was a calm confidence in her posture. That afternoon, a group of village women gathered near the hut, whispering openly, "He has been here for days. They say he is worth billions." And the nurse, "What if she tries something?" Amaka overheard. Of course she did. But she continued her routine without reaction. Later, as she walked toward the borehole to fetch water, Tochi followed. "Does it bother you?" he asked. "What the gossip?" She shrugged lightly. "People talk when they are bored. You're very calm." "No," she corrected gently. "I just don't react to everything." He laughed softly. "That's a skill I don't have." She glanced at him. "You built companies. That requires patience." "Yes, but in business, patience comes with profit." And here he looked at her carefully. "I'm still learning." There was something honest in his tone that made her look away first. By evening, Mom and Goy seemed stronger than usual. She insisted on sitting outside longer. The three of them sat quietly as the sky turned gold. For a rare moment, no one spoke. Children ran past, laughing. A woman called her goats home. Smoke from cooking fires rose gently into the air. This Tochi said softly, almost to himself. "Feels peaceful," Amaka nodded. "It always has been." He turned to her. "Why didn't you leave? With your grades, you could have." She considered the question. "I thought about it, and my mother was sick. Then she passed. Then I realized." She paused, searching for the right words. Running isn't always growth. He absorbed that slowly. He had built his life by running forward relentlessly. Yet here was a woman who had stayed and grown roots instead. That night, after Amaka left, Tochi sat beside his mother. "She is special," Mama and Goy murmured weakly. He didn't argue. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A small boy tripped and scraped his knee near the hut. Before anyone could react, Amaka rushed forward, cleaned the wound, and comforted him gently. The boy stopped crying within minutes. Tochi watched the interaction closely. There was no audience, no performance, just instinct, compassion. It struck him then. He had spent years accumulating wealth that impressed the world. But Amaka possessed something rarer: influence without power, respect without money, care without expectation. That afternoon, when she finished and prepared to leave, he stopped her again. "Amaka," she turned. "Yes. If my mother recovers fully, would you continue working at the clinic?" "Of course. And if you had more resources, I would serve more people." He hesitated. "And if you were offered a different life?" Her expression shifted slightly. "What kind of different life?" He realized suddenly that his question held more weight than he intended. "I don't know yet," he admitted. She held his gaze longer this time. "Sometimes," she said softly, "a different life looks attractive from far away, but up close it may not fit." The breeze moved between them. He understood the unspoken layer beneath her words. She would not trade herself for comfort, and that realization did something powerful inside him. For the first time in years, Tochi questioned something deeply. Had he mistaken wealth for worth? Because standing there watching a village nurse walk away in simple slippers while he stood beside a luxury car, he felt something undeniable. She was not the one lacking. He was not money, not status, but something quieter, something steady, something that could not be bought. And as she disappeared down the dusty path once again, Tochi realized he was no longer just grateful for her. He was drawn to her, not because she admired his wealth, but because she didn't, and that more than anything felt like the rarest treasure he had ever encountered. The village had started adjusting to Tochi's presence. The Rolls-Royce was no longer shocking. It was simply there, like an expensive visitor, unsure how long he intended to stay. Children played around it now. Men greeted him cautiously, but with growing respect. But something else had shifted too. The space between him and Amaka. It was no longer just gratitude, it was awareness. He noticed the way she tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear when concentrating. The way she spoke more firmly when patients resisted medication. The way her laughter, rare but genuine, felt like sunlight breaking through thick clouds. And Amaka noticed him too. She noticed that he had stopped checking his phone constantly. That he now arrived at the hut before she did. That he listened carefully when she spoke even about small things. But she refused to let herself interpret it. Men like Tochi did not settle in huts. They visited, they admired, they left. One evening, Maman seemed unusually alert. Her eyes were clearer, her voice steadier. "Help me sit outside," she insisted. Between the two of them, they carefully supported her onto a wooden chair beneath the mango tree near the hut. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting patterned shadows across her thin face. She looked at her son. "You have grown," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "So have you," she chuckled weakly, in wrinkles. They all laughed softly. Then her gaze shifted to Amaka. "You are tired," she observed. Amaka shook her head quickly. "No, Mama." But Mama Goy knew the language of women who carried too much quietly. She reached for Amaka's hand and placed it into Tochi's. The gesture was slow, intentional. Both of them froze. "My son," she said carefully. "Money can build houses, but it cannot build peace." Tochi swallowed. Mama Goy continued, her voice faint but clear. "This girl, she gave me dignity when I had nothing left." Amaka tried to pull her hand away gently. "Mama, please." "No," the old woman insisted softly. "Let me speak." Her eyes locked with her son's. "Do not overlook what God places before you." Silence wrapped around them. The breeze moved gently through the tree. Tochi felt the warmth of Amaka's hand in his. She was trying subtly to withdraw, but he didn't let go immediately. He couldn't because his mother had just spoken aloud what he had been afraid to admit. After settling Mama and back inside to rest, the air between him and Amaka felt charged. She busied herself packing her things. He stood near the doorway watching. "You don't have to feel uncomfortable," he said quietly. "I'm not," she replied too quickly. He stepped closer. "You think I haven't noticed?" She stopped moving. "Noticed what?" "That you avoid looking at me when my mother says things like that." Her breath caught slightly. "Your mother is old. She speaks emotionally." "And you?" he asked. She finally met his eyes. "I live realistically." The words weren't sharp, just guarded. He respected that. "Realistically," he repeated softly. "What does that mean for you?" "It means," she said steadily, "men in your position don't build futures in villages. And women in your position don't trust promises easily," he countered. That struck closer than she expected. She turned away slightly. "You will leave soon," she said. "Maybe. Definitely. You sound certain." She faced him again. "Because I understand worlds." He studied her. "And you think I don't understand yours?" She gave a small, sad smile. "You understand it as a visitor." The truth of that statement lingered. For the first time, Tochi felt something unfamiliar creeping into his chest. Fear, not of business failure, not of competition, but of losing something he hadn't yet fully claimed. That night, he barely slept. He replayed every conversation, every glance, every quiet moment they shared beside his mother. He had built his life on decisive action. Yet here he was hesitating because this was not a business deal. This was heart, and heart had no contracts. The next morning, Amaka arrived earlier than usual. She found him outside already waiting. "You're early," she said. "So are you." They stood facing each other in the soft morning light. "I've been thinking," he began. She stiffened slightly. "That's usually dangerous," she said lightly. He almost smiled, but his expression remained serious. "I have seen many countries," he said slowly. "Met many women, successful, educated, beautiful." She didn't react. "But none of them," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "None of them stayed." Her brow furrowed slightly. "Stayed when it was inconvenient, when there was no audience." Her eyes softened just a fraction. "That's different." "No," he said quietly. "It's not." Silence stretched between them. He stepped closer. "I came back to take my mother away from poverty." She listened, but I found something else. Her heart began to beat faster, and she hated that it did. "Don't," she warned softly. "Don't what?" "Don't make this complicated." "It already is." She looked at him fully now. "What are you saying, Tochi?" He took a slow breath. "I want you in my life." The words hung heavy in the air. Not playful, not casual, serious. She blinked. "You don't even know me. I know enough. You know I care for your mother. I know you care for people without calculation." She shook her head slowly. "You're emotional right now. You just came home. Everything feels intense. That's not it. Then what is it? She pressed. It's peace, he said quietly. Her expression faltered. When I sit here with you, I feel something I haven't felt in years. She swallowed. And what happens when you return to your world? You come with me. The words slipped out before he softened them. Her eyes widened. Tochi, I'm serious. And I'm not a suitcase you pack because you're feeling inspired. The firmness in her voice grounded him. He exhaled. You're right. She stepped back slightly. You built your life for 15 years without me. Without this village. Without even visiting. He didn't argue. You think I don't see that? He asked quietly. Then understand why I hesitate. He moved closer again slowly this time. I'm not offering you escape, he said. I'm asking for partnership. She searched his face for doubt. She found none, but fear still lingered. What if I don't fit into your world? She whispered. He smiled faintly. What if my world needs reshaping? That answer shook her more than confidence would have because it wasn't dominance, it was humility. Inside the hut, Mom and Goy stirred weakly. They both turned instinctively toward the sound. Before stepping inside, Tochi reached gently for Amaka's hand. I don't need your answer today, he said softly. But don't dismiss this as temporary. She looked at their joined hands, then at him. For once, she murmured, don't make promises you can't keep. His jaw tightened slightly. I won't. And for the first time since he arrived in Umua, the air between them no longer felt uncertain. Felt like the beginning of something fragile, something powerful, something that would require more courage than wealth. Inside the hut, Mom and Goy watched them quietly, and she smiled because some promises are spoken aloud, and some are made the moment two people choose not to walk away. News in Umua did not travel. It exploded. By the end of the week, everyone had a version of the story. The billionaire has fallen for the nurse. He wants to marry her. She trapped him. She planned it from the beginning. The whispers grew sharper each day. First, Amaka ignored them. She had survived gossip before. When she stayed in the village instead of chasing city opportunities, people talked. When she spent evenings at Mango's hut, people talked. But this was different. Now the gossip carried accusation. Now it carried envy. One afternoon at the borehole, the murmurs were louder than usual. So now you won't greet us again. Abi, one woman said with a forced smile. Amaka kept her expression neutral. Good afternoon. You must be happy. Rolls-Royce is sweeter than Okada. Soft laughter followed. Amaka lifted her bucket without responding. Just don't forget who you were. Another voice added behind her. That one lingered. She walked home slower that evening, not because she was ashamed, but because she was thinking. Love was beautiful in quiet moments beneath mango trees. It was heavier when examined by a village. Meanwhile, Tochi was facing his own storm. His extended stay had not gone unnoticed in his business world. Calls became more urgent, messages more pointed. Then came the visit. Two of his senior business associates arrived unexpectedly in the nearby town and requested to see him. They drove into Umua in a sleek SUV. Not as dramatic as the Rolls-Royce, but polished enough to announce status. When they stepped out near the hut, their discomfort was obvious. Sir, one of them said cautiously, glancing around at the mutis, we didn't expect you to stay this long. To what do I owe the visit? Tochi asked calmly. There are concerns, the other replied. The expansion deal in Dubai. Investors are asking questions. I'll handle it. And there are rumors. Tochi's gaze hardened slightly. What rumors? That you're planning something personal with someone here? He didn't respond immediately. The men exchanged glances. With respect, sir, the first continued, lowering his voice. A village nurse, Tochi. The interruption came from behind them. All three men turned. Amaka stood a few steps away, holding her medical bag. She had overheard just enough. The associates, yes! Tahened her quickly, assessing, judging. Toy stepped toward her instinctively. Is Mama okay? He asked. She's resting? Amaka replied softly. Her gaze flickered briefly to the two men. One of them gave a polite but distant nod. So this is, he began, then stopped. Tochi's tone cooled. This is Amaka. The silence was thick. After a few strained exchanges about business matters, the associates left, but the damage lingered. Later that evening, Amaka sat outside the hut alone, while Mom and Goy slept inside. The sky was painted in soft purple hues. Tochi approached slowly. "You heard?" he said quietly. "Yes," he exhaled. "I don't care what they think." She looked at him carefully. "That's easy to say here." His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "In this village, you are the successful son who returned there." She paused. "You are a brand." He hated that she was right. "They don't understand you," he said. She gave a small, almost sad smile. "They don't have to, but I do." He sat beside her on the wooden bench. "You think I'm ashamed?" he asked. "No," she said honestly. "I think you're torn." The word landed precisely. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "For 15 years I built something powerful," he admitted. "Reputation matters. Perception matters. And I," she asked softly. "You matter, but differently?" He turned to her fully. "No." She held his gaze. "Then understand this," she said calmly. "If you choose me, it cannot be half-hearted. I will not live as a secret you explain away in boardrooms." The firmness in her voice wasn't angry. It was protective of herself. He respected that more than she knew. "I would never hide you," he said. "Then don't let them reduce me." The wind shifted between them. Inside the hut, Mom and Goy coughed lightly. They both turned instinctively and went in together. The next few days tested them both. A local businessman approached Tochi with a proposition. "There is a governor's daughter in the city," he hinted. "Educated, influential family. It would strengthen your political connections." Tochi's response was immediate. "I'm not seeking connections," but the suggestion lingered in the air like temptation. Status marrying, status made sense in his world. It was expected. Meanwhile, Amaka faced subtle cruelty. Patients at the clinic began treating her differently, some overly respectful, some suspicious. One woman whispered loudly, "Let her treat you well. She will soon leave us for Big House." That night, alone in her small room, Amaka allowed herself to feel the weight she had been suppressing. She stared at her faded blue uniform hanging near the wall. If she stepped into Tochi's world, would she still be this version of herself? Would she lose the quiet satisfaction of serving freely? Or worse, would people assume every achievement she made afterward was because of him? The fear was not of poverty. It was of invisibility, of being swallowed by a world that did not know her. The breaking point came unexpectedly. One afternoon, while Tochi was arranging better medical equipment for his mother, he overheard 2 villagers speaking harshly near the hut. She used the old woman to enter his life. Clever girl. Something in him snapped. He stepped forward. "Enough." The men froze. "If you have a problem, speak to me directly," he said calmly but firmly. "She didn't plan anything," he continued. "If anyone pursued anything here, it was me." The men lowered their heads, embarrassed, but the message spread quickly. For the first time, the village saw something clearly. He was not rescuing her. He was choosing her. That evening, Amaka stood outside the hut. Quiet. "I didn't ask you to defend me," she said. "I know. Why did you?" He stepped closer. "Because I won't allow anyone to rewrite your story." Her breath caught slightly. "You don't have to fight everyone. I'm not fighting them," he replied softly. "I'm standing beside you." That difference meant everything. Inside, Mom and Goy watched from her resting place, eyes shining. She had lived long enough to know when love was real, not the loud kind, the steady kind, the kind that survives opinion. As night settled over Yumua, Tochi and Amaka sat beneath the mango tree again. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just presence. The world had tested them through gossip, through status, through pride, but neither had stepped back, and in that quiet resilience, something stronger than attraction was forming: respect, commitment, humility. Because love is not proven in comfort. It is proven when both people choose each other. Even when choosing costs something, and for the first time both of them understood this was no longer curiosity. This was intention. The proposal did not happen in a grand restaurant. There were no violins, no flashing cameras, no luxury skyline behind them. It happened inside the small hut. Mom and Goy had been stronger that week, not fully healed, but brighter, present, her voice steadier than it had been in months. Amaka had just finished adjusting her pillow when Tochi entered with unusual seriousness in his expression. "Sit," he told Amaka gently. She frowned slightly. Why are you looking at me like that? Just sit. Mama and Goy watched with quiet curiosity. Tochi knelt, not on marble floors, not on polished tiles. On the hardened earth floor of the hut he once grew up in. Amaka's breath caught immediately. Tochi. He reached into his pocket and brought out a small velvet box. Her heart began to pound so loudly she was sure both of them could hear it. I left this village 15 years ago with ambition. He began quietly. I thought success meant building something bigger than this place. He looked around the hut briefly. I built it. The companies, the wealth, the reputation. His eyes returned to hers. But I didn't build peace. Tears were already gathering in her eyes. I came back to fix my guilt, he continued. Instead, I found you. Mom and Go's hands trembled slightly in excitement. You loved my mother when I was absent, Tochi said softly. You protected her dignity. You stood beside me when the world questioned you. He opened the box. Inside was a simple but elegant ring. Not oversized, not flashy. Beautiful. Intentional. I don't want you as a part of my life, he said. I want you as my life. Silence filled the hut. Amaka's hands were shaking now. I cannot promise you a world without criticism, he continued honestly, but I promise you I will never hide you. I will never reduce you, and I will always show up. Those words hit deeper than any romantic line could, because showing up was everything to her. He swallowed Amaka. Will you marry me? She couldn't speak at first. All the fear she had guarded against rushed forward. Fear of being swallowed by his world. Fear of losing herself. Fear of becoming a story people whispered about. But then she remembered something. He had stayed in the hut. He had defended her. He had listened. He had learned. He had chosen. Her voice trembled slightly. Yes. Mom and Goy burst into tears before either of them could react. Yes, she repeated loudly. Toy slipped the ring onto Amaka's finger. It fit perfectly. The village did not just hear about the engagement. It exploded with it. Within hours, women gathered near the hut, pretending they just happened to pass. Men who once whispered now spoke loudly about destiny. Didn't I say that girl was special? I always knew. Human memory is convenient that way. But Tochi didn't care. He moved quickly. There would be no secret ceremony, no quiet registry signing abroad. He wanted their union witnessed, honored, celebrated openly. And so for the first time in Yumu's history, preparations for a wedding unlike any other began. The church was small, white walls slightly cracked, wooden benches polished by decades of use, but Tochi insisted on renovating it before the ceremony. Fresh paint, new fans, decorations, not extravagantly but beautifully. He did not want to overwhelm the village. He wanted to elevate it. Amaka meanwhile felt overwhelmed in a different way. Women from neighboring villages volunteered to help her prepare. Some out of genuine joy, some out of curiosity. You are going to live abroad now, one woman said excitedly, while braiding her hair days before the ceremony. Maybe, Amaka replied softly. You are lucky. She smiled faintly. Luck. If only they knew how much fear had come before this peace. The night before the wedding, she sat alone in her small room, staring at her nurse uniform hanging on the wall. Would she still wear it? Would she still belong here? There was a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Tochi standing there, respectfully distant. I won't come in, he said. I just wanted to see you. Her heart softened instantly. Are you nervous? He asked gently. She exhaled slowly. A little about tomorrow? About everything? He nodded. I am too. That surprised her. You? She asked. Yes. Why? Because this is the only investment I've made without calculation. She laughed softly through her nerves. That's not romantic. It's honest. She stepped slightly closer. I don't want to disappear, she whispered. You won't, he replied immediately. I don't want people to say I stopped being me. He looked at her with steady intensity. Then don't. Sounded simple, but coming from him, it felt like permission to remain whole. The wedding day arrived with sunlight that felt intentional. The village was alive before dawn. Women cooked in large pots. Children ran excitedly between houses. Music drifted softly through the air. And when the Rolls-Royce arrived at Amaka's house to escort her, there was no arrogance in it, just symbolism. She stepped out wearing a white gown that flowed gently around her frame. It was elegant, but not extravagant, exactly what she chose. Her hair was styled beautifully, her face glowed, not from heavy makeup, but from something deeper. Peace. When she entered the church, a hush fell over the crowd. Tochi stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit, but his composure wavered the moment he saw her. For a brief second, he wasn't a billionaire. He was just a man stunned by the woman walking toward him. Mom and Goy sat in the front row, supported by cushions, eyes shining with pride. As Amaka reached him, their hands met. Warm, certain, the pastor spoke about love, about commitment, about humility. But for them, the vows felt more personal. To love you publicly and privately, Tochi promised. To stand beside you without fear, Amaka replied when he slid the wedding ring onto her finger. Applause erupted through the church. Women ululated loudly. Children clapped wildly. Even the men who once doubted wiped at their eyes discreetly because this was not just a wedding, it was proof. Proof that kindness was not foolish. Proof that wealth could bow to character. Proof that love could cross worlds without losing dignity. When they stepped outside as husband and wife, the village celebrated as if the victory belonged to everyone. And in a way, it did. Because in choosing her publicly, Tochi had shifted something deeper than gossip. He had rewritten expectation as he helped Amaka into the Rolls-Royce. Now, not as a nurse, not as a rumor, but as his wife, he leaned close and whispered, "You were never beneath my world." She looked at him with quiet strength. "And you were never above mine." And in that balance, not dominance, not rescue, but partnership, their marriage began. Not built on wealth, not built on pity, but built on choice. And that is what shocked the village the most. Not the car, not the suit, but the fact that the billionaire did not elevate her. He honored her and she did not lose herself. She walked into her new life whole. The first night, Amaka slept in Tochi's mansion abroad. She couldn't sleep. Not because the bed wasn't comfortable. It was too comfortable. The mattress felt like it swallowed her gently. The room was large, larger than her entire house. In Umua. The curtains were thick and heavy. The air conditioning hummed softly in the background. It was quiet. Too quiet. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, remembering the sound of crickets outside her old window, the distant chatter of neighbors, the clatter of cooking pots. The silence felt different, almost intimidating. Beside her, Tochi turned slightly. "You're awake," he murmured. "Yes." "Regretting it already?" he teased softly. She smiled faintly in the dark. "No." He shifted closer. "Talk to me." She hesitated. "It feels big." "The house, the life." He was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll make it smaller," he said gently. She turned to look at him. "How?" "By filling it with what matters." That answer settled her more than reassurance ever could. The transition was not instant. Amaka did not suddenly become comfortable with galas, luxury events, and polished conversations about investments. At her first corporate dinner, she wore a simple but elegant dress to help her choose. The room glittered with wealth, crystal glasses, designer gowns, tailored suits. Eyes turned when they entered, not because of her dress, but because of her. Whispers traveled softly. "That's the wife. She's simple," Tochi noticed. He felt the shift in the room like a temperature change, but Amaka held his arm calmly. "Breathe," she whispered under her breath. He almost laughed. "You're calming me?" "Yes." He straightened slightly. During dinner, someone finally asked the inevitable question. "So, Amaka, what do you do?" The tone was polite but loaded. She smiled gently. "I'm a nurse." A brief pause. "Oh," the woman replied, clearly expecting something else. Amaka continued, her voice steady. "I worked in a rural clinic for years. Elderly care, community health." There was no apology in her tone, no embarrassment, just fact. Toy watched the conversation shift. Her calm confidence did something powerful. It demanded respect without asking for it. Later that night in the car ride home, he looked at her differently. "You weren't intimidated," he said. She shrugged slightly. "They are people. You don't feel out of place." She thought about it honestly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But that doesn't mean I don't belong." That sentence stayed with him long after. Months passed and something beautiful began to unfold. Amaka did not abandon her calling. She expanded it with Tochi support and careful collaboration with leaders back home. She established a foundation focused on rural healthcare access. But she refused to let it become a charity built on pity. No photos of suffering for marketing, she insisted. No branding it with my name everywhere. She traveled back to Yumua frequently. The first time she returned after marriage, the village gathered again, but this time not with suspicion, with pride. She stepped out of the car, not in extravagant clothing, but in a neat blouse and trousers. And when she walked toward the clinic, she didn't hesitate. Inside, she met the same cracked walls, but they would not remain cracked for long. Within months, the clinic was renovated, modern equipment installed, training programs introduced, local nurses hired and paid fairly, not because she married wealth, but because she partnered it with purpose. The borehole near Mango's hut was repaired. The hut itself was rebuilt, not into a mansion, but into a comfortable, dignified home. Mom and Goy moved carefully through the new house, touching the walls like they were a miracle. You see, she told her son one afternoon, she did not leave this place behind. Toy smiled quietly. No, he agreed. She carried it forward. Their marriage was not without adjustment. There were days Amaka felt overwhelmed by travel schedules and formal obligations. There were days Tochi struggled balancing business expansion with his desire to be present, but they had built something early that sustained them. Honesty. When she felt unseen, she said it. When he felt pressured, he admitted it, and slowly their worlds blended, not perfectly but intentionally. One evening, standing on the balcony of their home overlooking the city skyline, AKA leaned against the railing. The lights below shimmered like scattered stars. It's beautiful, she said softly. To you? He asked. Yes, he studied her profile. Do you miss the village? She smiled faintly. Sometimes. He stepped behind her and wrapped his arms gently around her waist. Then we'll never lose it, he said. She turned slightly in his embrace. You don't regret it marrying you? Yes. He shook his head slowly. I've made investments worth millions, he said quietly. None of them changed me like this. She searched his face. Changed you how? He exhaled. I measure success differently now. She leaned her head lightly against his chest. That's good, he chuckled softly. It's terrifying. Why? Because it means losing you would matter more than losing money. Her heart softened deeply at that confession. You won't lose me, she whispered. Years later, people would tell their story in different versions. Some would emphasize the wealth, some would emphasize the luck, but the truth was simpler. Before the mansion, before the foundation, before the wedding, there was a nurse kneeling in a small hut. There was a son kneeling beside his mother in regret. In the end, everything came down to a choice, the choice to value character over status, kindness over appearance, and the person who remained when there was nothing to gain. One afternoon, during the anniversary celebration of the clinic in Yumua, a young girl approached Amaka shyly. I want to be like you, she said. Amaka knelt beside her. Why? Because you married a rich man. Amaka smiled gently and shook her head. No, be like me because I never stopped being myself. The girl frowned thoughtfully. And who were you? A nurse, Amaka replied. A woman with gentle hands who kept showing up. That evening, as she and Tochi drove back toward the city, he glanced at her. You know, he said, you were always rich. Amaka laughed softly. In what currency? Compassion, integrity, courage. She looked through the window at the fading outline of her village and realized he was right. Long before the Rolls-Royce, the mansion, or the powerful name beside hers, Amaka had possessed something money could never create: a heart that served without pride, loved without calculation, and remained kind even when life gave her every reason to become bitter. People called her fortunate because a billionaire chose her. But the truth was that Tochi had been the fortunate one. He had found a woman whose worth existed long before wealth entered her life. And together, they proved that the greatest fortune is not measured by what someone owns, but by the lives they transform simply by showing up with love.